Good morning, and thank you for joining us as we explore the 7 reasons why we can trust the Old Testament text. In other words, Old Testament textual reliability. We're going to be covering several topics here, and we've offered this as a call-in to allow you to come in and share your thoughts and share your own experience with the Old Testament. Give your perspective on why the Old Testament is also reliable. And there's several angles that we can take a look at this, and that's why we're going to be doing this more as a presentation and then see what you guys have to say as well. So top 7 reasons why we can trust the Old Testament text. And we say Old Testament text because we're looking at textual reliability. Now, we did this with the New Testament. We looked at, first of all, the accusations. Oh, the Bible's not reliable, blah, 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 blah. And looked at the arguments and tried to give the best responses we could for those. And then we were looking at this same thing, textual reliability for the New Testament. Looking at the manuscripts, how they were transmitted, how many there are versus other ancient texts like Homer, Iliad, and things like that. The New Testament just blows that away. Then we also looked at, was it corrupted? Meaning, were there other aspects that came in here that would do it? Specifically, looking at who wrote it. Was Matthew, Mark, and Luke, John written by those apostles? And were the other epistles and Revelation, who was that written by? Then we looked at the forbidden books of the New Testament, those that were banned. Dun, dun, dun. That is such a clickbaity type of phrase to use. It's like, oh, well, these are hidden and something that's banned. You got to go figure it out and go look. And somehow the Gospel of Thomas has a higher rating than the Gospel of Matthew. For some reason, they were trying to suppress it. And if we only found out why, then we'd discover the truth.
Yes, the forbidden knowledge.
And that's not even close to the truth. The New Testament was developed over time. It was written early in the first century and then accepted early in the second century and so forth. Even in the first century, these were accepted. You even see First Peter is talking about how Paul's writings, he puts that on the same level as the Old Testament scripture. And then the New Testament books being accepted, and eventually you get to the Council of Nicaea, which is said to be, I don't have that up there, but we do have the Council of Nicaea as well. We did cover that. And that was fun to put together because we did the skit for it. If you get a chance to see it, do. It's an awesome one. And I am planning on, because we did have technical difficulties with that, I am planning on re-releasing that with the actual skit at the beginning because it's awesome. You got to see it. So I'm going to check chat real quick here. I don't know if we have anybody coming up and saying anything about New Testament or Old Testament reliability yet. Maybe not. Just basically, what's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? It needs to be. I'm going to put this one up here because I do not know. Nerds
need a kingdom too.
That is so true, brother. So true. And if you get a chance to see the one that we did earlier this week on Dune,
that was a fun one.
There's a way. The reason why we do this is so we can look at entertainment biblically and then use it to be able to communicate to people. And part of that is know where we stand as Christians. Be able to give apologetic responses, give good responses for the questions, for the hope that is in you. And so that's why we hit this with 2 sides. And the other side is fun with Dune. And we need to know those things because we have to be able to speak the language of nerds to be able to pull them into the kingdom. And look at a couple more responses here. What do you guys have to say about Old Testament copying other religions? Ooh, we're not going to cover that now, but that might be a really good topic to.
Most of them are laughable.
Yes.
Most of them are on the same level as the claims about the New Testament.
Yeah, but that's a good question about apologetics because you guys just copied over there because other places in the Near East say the same thing. So there. And
see, Muslims try to stay away from that one because Muhammad was the ears.
Yeah.
So they try to stay away from any of those sort of claims because it backfires pretty easily.
Yeah, well, that's true. But you can see where the Old Testament, we can dig in more into the history. Man, there's so much history here. In some ways, the Old Testament is largely neglected in the church. In the modern Western church, you do see a lot of neglect for the Old Testament.
Actually, surprisingly, somewhere you don't see a lot of neglect for this. And I was kind of surprised to see this whenever I was doing my college courses was Humanities 101 from a secular college. Their main resource for history was the Bible.
Really?
For that early period of human history. And that's where they went, as this is reliable. And they were showing the archaeological evidence of it as it was progressing. And it was specifically on the Exodus.
Oh,
their progression and where their camps were set up and how it was like, okay, they're on this side. Now they're on this side of the Red Sea. And it's like, okay, so did they go up and around or did they go through? My professor didn't like my questions.
I bet.
They got upset with me.
I bet. There's this old story about this old Pentecostal woman who visits this mainline denominational church, and they're very liberal in their thinking, and the pastor there believes that there really were no miracles in the Bible. These are just fables that are given. And when he gets to the Red Sea, he's talking about it. He says, and when they came to the Red Sea, supposedly they had crossed it, and it was supposed to be this big miracle, but it wasn't. It wasn't this miracle at all. I've been to the Red Sea. And it's about, I don't know. And the Pentecostal woman says, praise God, they crossed the Red Sea. God made a miracle. And he says, no, ma'am, they didn't. When I was there, I saw it was only 2 inches of water. And then she yells, well, praise God. He says, madam, please, why would you continue on this? He says, my God drowned an entire army of Egyptians in 2 inches of water. So, there is that.
There's that part. So, no, I just thought that was interesting because, again, I was attending a secular college and that wasn't the point of it. And the professor actually wanted to cover up any of the miracles that were in the Bible. Oh. None of those happened, but we can rely on it because it's historically accurate. I'm like, okay, the same people that write down those historical events were the same ones writing down the miracle parts too. Right. So why are you cherry picking?
Yeah, that is cherry picking.
Again, didn't like that line of questioning.
Thomas also said, I don't think it's copying as much as polemics against the neighbors. Man, you guys are on fire this morning. Look at this. So I'm guessing we're talking about they had to answer the people around them, just like we have to answer the people around us. And kind of poking fun at it. The whole 10 plagues of Egypt.
Oh, those were great. I
mean, that's like God mocking the Egyptian god of the Nile, the Egyptian god of the sun, Ra. By like, where'd the sun go? I don't know. So all these things are going on here. And I could see God in heaven when the angels say, hey, try this one. Look at that God. Let's do that one. It would be fun. So we're looking at these. This is what we did for the New Testament. We looked back and took a note. So now we're going to take a crack at the Old Testament. What do we mean by trust the text? You can trust a text, really, all of you. What does that mean? Well, there's different aspects, and so we really do need to define what we mean by trust or reliability. The first is historical reliability. Is the Bible historically accurate? This guy, I got to give a plug and a shout out to him. This is, what is his name? Joel Kramer. And he does archaeological excavations or archaeological research. And he has these videos that bring you out and show you these different parts of it. Joel Kramer. And I have a link to his video channel. He has a YouTube channel. I have a link in the description below. And if you get a chance, check him out. But he gives a lot of evidence showing the historical reliability of the New Testament. We're going to look at an example later at the end of this video too about something the Bible said happened, and secular historians, archaeologists just kind of laughed it off as being a fable, and it was true. So theological reliability is another one, textual reliability, and so each one of these that we could look at, we're going to focus on textual reliability. And so what is meant by textual reliability? The Old Testament has been preserved throughout the centuries of copying and transmission, and scholars have meticulously studied its textual history. The overall fidelity and transmission is considered very high, especially when compared to other ancient Near East texts. So let's dig into that a little bit further.
Kind of when compared to all texts, because holy cow,
you're talking about
anything from early on, as far as amount of reliability, as far as other texts.
Oh, you're talking about the number of manuscripts that are available. Yeah, there was a bit of a problem. Now in the New Testament, we did that and we compared it. We had a chart comparing the number of manuscripts that are available, either partial or whole, and the number of how long it was between the time it was written and the time that we have the first manuscript. When we say manuscript, that's handwritten copy, because this is before, and this is an important point. Everything on this was before the printing press. So it has to be handwritten. Of course, when we do handwritten, sometimes there's a transmission error. You make a mistake in what you're transmitting. I don't know how many times you looked over and you copy something, maybe you skip a line or get a little dyslexic or something as you're writing. So those things, because this is done by human beings, this is a possibility of transmission like this. But we compared the manuscripts of the Old New Testament to those of other ancient Near East writings, and it blows it out of the water. Like,
oh yeah,
Homer and the Iliad, Homer writing the Iliad and the Odyssey. I mean, there's only a few manuscripts there. I think maybe, if I remember correctly, just I would say 7, but now I had to go back and take a look if that's the case. But it was hundreds and hundreds of years after it was written. That's the first manuscript we have. Now, am I questioning if Homer read? No, I'm not really questioning that. But if we're going to question the Bible, which has all this textual evidence, and we need to do that with the other ancient Near East writings as well. So is that what you were talking about with this?
If we were just as critical on any of those other writings as we are on the Bible, we would know nothing of history.
Yeah. So, and then I was going to say that one of the problems that we had with the Old Testament scripture that we didn't have with the New Testament scripture is that during the Middle Ages with the Jews, they would be very careful on their text. They would have special ways that they would treat it, special ways they would transmit it. We're going to look at that here in a little bit. And one of the problems was the persecution of the Jews on a regular basis. They had to hide these scriptures, and oftentimes their synagogues would be destroyed or burned or whatever, and the scriptures would be gone with them. And they would have to rely on other synagogues to get them. They were so careful on the preservation of these texts that when they became kind of worn or worn out, or maybe when they were stored, you had insects dig into them, damage the text, and so forth. They wouldn't burn them. They would take them and they would bury them, and sometimes they would bury them with the older scholars. So in the tomb with the older scholar, they would have the older scholar would be dead at the time, though. Okay.
Yeah, we're not talking about human.
They wouldn't stuff it. You're getting in there. No, I can't. You're too senile. We're stuffing you with all these texts. But they would put these in. Now that happened in Egypt. I believe it was in Alexandria. There's a famous place where they found thousands and thousands of manuscripts. Now these were worn, old. Some were partial and stuff like this. But they found it because they had buried them. And it had been covered and forgotten for such a long time. And I believe in the 19th century, they were digging in there, and they found all these ancient manuscripts. And I thought, wow, what a treasure trove. So that was a cool thing. Textual reliability of the Old Testament. So what do we mean about this? Well, the textual reliability of the Old Testament refers to the accuracy and fidelity of transmission from its original content through the process of copying and transmission over thousands of years. The aspect of reliability is most important because it affects our understanding of the text's original meaning and historical content. Now, there are some key points regarding textual reliability in the Old Testament. The first one is manuscript evidence. The Old Testament was originally written in Hebrew with some sections in Aramaic on materials such as parchment, papyrus, clay tablets, and over time, these manuscripts were copied by scribes to produce new copies. While the original manuscripts known as autographs no longer exist, just like in the New Testament, there were thousands of ancient manuscripts and fragments containing portions of the Old Testament text, important manuscripts, including the Dead Sea Scrolls and the ones that I was talking about in Egypt, which contain fragments dating back to the 3rd century BC or the 1st century AD. Then you have textual criticism, and we looked at this before with the New Testament. This is the scholarly discipline concerned with examining the manuscripts of ancient texts to reconstruct the original wording as accurately as possible. In case of the Old Testament, textual critics compare different manuscript traditions and analyze their readings. Now, this is something a little bit different with the Old Testament compared to the New Testament. There are a couple of different traditions of writing and transmission with it. One of them is the Masoretes, who were the ones who added the vowel points to the Old Testament text, the Hebrew text. And then you have, that was, so we have the Masoretic text. It serves as the basis for most modern translations. It was based on the work of the Jewish scholars known as the Masoretes, who meticulously preserved and transmitted the Hebrew from around the 6th to the 10th centuries AD. Now, that timing is important there. And their text contains detailed annotations regarding the text's pronunciation, spelling, grammar, which has helped ensure its accuracy. So one of the things that happened when they came along is that Hebrew wasn't spoken as much as a regular language anymore. It's, by this time we're talking about thousands of years old. So as you can imagine, languages change over time. English had the great vowel shift that happened, and in combination with other languages, Norse and French from the Norman invasion and so forth. So you get this kind of morphing over time. And just the pronunciation, even if you were to see it written down, it may not be spoken the same way as what is now. Like the English word see, we have SEA and we have SEE, like I'm seeing something, or the body of water. Those were actually pronounced differently a few centuries ago. And so that's why the spelling is different. We say, why don't we just spell it all the same way? Because they were actually pronounced differently. So those things happen in English. You can imagine it happening in another language like Hebrew. And that is what happens. That's what the Masoretes were looking at. And they said, we got to do something about this, because their language, just their written language, didn't have any vowels. I mean, spoken, obviously, they have vowels, but there was no written vowels that they put down there. And you can imagine, well, how can you read something that doesn't have any vowels? Well, think about how we would abbreviate things. Sometimes you have like management, MGT. You take out vowels, and that condenses it down. And that was a form of writing, just not for Hebrew, but for other languages in the Near East. They would put the vowels in. And the Masoretes would come in and say, listen, we need to fill this in because these young men here don't know how to say it right. So we're going to put these points. And they didn't want to put extra letters in there for vowels, because that would change the text. And we'll look at a minute why that would cause a problem. But they put it underneath the text, or on top, or around, and they put marginal notes on the side for how to speak this. And there were certain people who would be designated as reading in the synagogue, these would be cantors that would read Hebrew text, and it became like almost like a beautiful ritualistic way of speaking that you could have these guys do this. So I'm going to take a moment and look at a couple of the comments we have in the what you guys have here. This is from Francis. Exactly, it's like language has changed. Same happened for Hebrew, but English, it had it worse. What exactly happened? Americanization.
Well, actually, English is, and I need to do a deeper study. Definitely, I mean, one of the things I want to do is I want to do English compared to Arabic, because Arabic's the one that's like, oh, it's the most complex language. Oh, it's the most in-depth language. I'm like, guys, English has a very complicated history. There's a lot put into English that has changed.
Are they saying, this the argument that's just complex, hard to understand Arabic, or what?
Sometimes, yes. It counts on what the conversation is and what the convenience is.
Oh, okay.
Because sometimes it is, but the Quran, you see, is perfectly clear until you find issues with it. Then it's, no, you must completely understand this language in order to understand it. And you see, it's because it's just so complex. But the reason why it was chosen was because it was just the perfect language in order to get the ideas out, except you can't understand the ideas unless you completely understand the language, which it's completely complex if you have issues.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense.
It's a convenience argument.
Well, I would say that you do, if you're to study the biblical languages, original languages, there are nuances there that you may not catch if you're just looking at a translation. So there is truth to that. But then that argument that they're giving, they're really giving both sides. You can't have both. It's either
you can't
like
have
one,
both.
one or the other.
It's perfectly clear for all mankind. You can easily understand it, or it's not. Pick a side.
Pick a side.
I can work with either. I just have to have one. Okay.
So, wow, we got a lot more comments in here. So I'm going to try to, which one here? I know that one there, but I think that, okay. Gotcha. The channel, John showed Expedition Bible is a vid, did a vid on archaeological evidence for David. Yeah, this guy is fantastic. I mean, check it out. It's a good channel. So we have the Masoretic text, the Masoretes, the work that they had done, and there was so much. The work that they did was very important because it would be, some words in Hebrew could be difficult to know which one you're talking about without actually having the vowel points there that they added. So then you have variants and other challenges. Now, despite the overall reliability of the Old Testament text, there are still variant readings and textual challenges. These can result from copyist errors, like I talked about, linguistic difficulties, and differences between manuscript traditions. The textual critics examine these variants and determine the most likely original reading, often relying on principles such as lectio difficultur. The more difficult reading is preferred. And they also look at contextual considerations. Overall, no ancient text is without textual variants. The Old Testament has been transmitted with a high, probably the highest degree of accuracy and reliability, thanks to the efforts of Jewish scribes, scholars, and Christian scholars as well, in religious communities throughout history. But how did they do it? How did the scribes ensure accuracy? What methods would you use? And I'm making that as an open question to everybody. What methods, if you were to, now you had to do it manually, right? Because no computers involved, no printing press or anything. How would you make sure, it's your job now, okay? I'm giving you guys a job. It's your job to make sure that we transmit these texts, copy, word for word, dot for dot, little thing here, little thing there. Everything gets copied over accurately and reliably. And I'm going to open this up for the live chat too, for anybody to come in on this. If you want to give your 2 cents worth, we're also going to be checking the chat to see what your responses are. But here's another aspect to think about it. Do we use any kind of air checking in the modern world?
Yes. Checksums.
Checksums. Okay, so you're talking about in computer or digital data transmission.
Yep. Transmitting from one computer to another or over the internet. Yes, there are specific sections in the code that are known as checksums that are saying, hey, does it match up to what I expect to have sent?
Right.
You know, do we have this many bytes? Are these many positive, these many negative? What is the configuration? Do they match?
Right.
Okay, yes, they do. Good. We're all solid.
So here's an example. This answers one of the questions. How would you check for reliability of text? And they actually did this too. We'll look at that, one of those aspects. They kind of had a checksum method of making sure that this piece of paper matches that piece of paper. So I'm going to check in the chat real quick, see what else we have in here. This is a response to something that was mentioned earlier about the King David, the archaeology for King David. So if you visit Jerusalem, the city of David is well excavated. I would imagine, but there's still things that they're finding now that are unexpected. And even though it has been gone over with a fine-tooth comb, there are methods of archaeology now with maybe using sonar and other things, the DNA tests and so forth, that you can find even more.
That being said, nothing they've found has contradicted what the scriptures have said. It's all been, everything they've discovered has just confirmed more and more what the scriptures say. So it's not that they're finding contradictory stuff. It's just, now nope, that was right. And that's historically correct. And we were wrong about this. And the Bible was right.
Yeah. And I'm going to keep my eyes open. I want to be unbiased with looking at this. What evidence do we see? Is there something that we would find that would contradict? Okay, let's be real about it and look at it with an open mind. But so far, I don't think there's really been anything. There's some question about the date of Exodus. I think it's just a matter of time before we discover that. It's not so much contradictions like the absence. One of the claims that's made about the Old Testament and historical reliability is, it doesn't say anything about that people group, or, I didn't hear anything about King David. I mean, obviously he was just made up. Oh, okay, well, there is something there. Whoops. Okay, well, all right, you're right about that one. And going forward. So we've got another comment here from Thomas Hall saying, scribes were a discipline with overseers, elder scribes, going over their work. And true, you hit it on the head. We're going to be going over several ways that they made sure that one copy was matched the original. I'm going to copy this one here. I don't want to say the original because that'd be autographs, the originals that we have. We don't have the originals, but I'm going to make sure that this is copying one for one the other. And there were methods they used, having overseers, other scribes there, elder scribes, making sure they did do that. So that is correct. That was right on the nose. And exactly, even Shiloh is being excavated now. Cool. Being in America, there's not a whole lot in terms of archaeological evidence or things underground that we know. So being in Europe or especially in the Middle East, I would imagine you couldn't dig a telephone line without possibly coming across something.
Yeah, I mean, in America, you have the Native Americans who were here previously, that bunch of warring tribes that consistently killed each other and enslaved each other, but most of their history was very temporary.
Well, we do have
what they used to build things were very temporary.
Right.
So like wooden structures that rotted away, or underground that mostly rotted away. We could still find some of the forts that they had originally. And I mean, if they were nomadic, like most of the Plains Indians were, there wasn't anything left they picked up and moved. We can
Yeah,
find
you
campsites.
you
but
do
that's
have
about it.
some here and there in Ohio. You do have a lot of Indian mounds, especially down in Mississippi area, Delta area. There were a lot of mounds, but
Not to the scale.
not to the scale of what you have in Europe, where I'm sure you have to have all sorts of permits before you can even, dig a hole. I'm guessing. I don't know. I'm not sure what it is out there. So you do have. You were correct. And what is necessary in making sure that all this is transmitted correctly? The scribes of the Old Testament employed several methods to assure the accuracy of copying transmission of the text. These were methods that were crucial in maintaining the fidelity of scriptures throughout the centuries. The first one that we're looking at is meticulous copying. They were trained to copy the text with great care. So there was training involved with this. It wasn't just, hey, get this guy off the street, we're going to pay him minimum wage. He comes in here and, whoops, he spilled his coffee over. Oh, start over again. They worked in controlled environments, often in what were called during the Middle Ages scriptoria, with monasteries and other religious institutions where they could focus on their task without distraction. Counting letters and words. This is where the checksum came in. Scribes would count the number of letters and words in a line or text to ensure that their copy matched the original. If a discrepancy was found, they would carefully check with both the original and their copy to identify where the correct errors were. So that was your checksum type of thing. And then standardized scripts. Use of standardized scripts. Scribes followed styles of writing, which helped them maintain consistency and reliability across the manuscripts. This uniformity made it easier to compare different copies and transmissions. So, in other words, this would be similar to making sure that everybody's pretty much writing the same way. That's why when you see the Masoretic Hebrew text is this sort of block form, that everybody is doing the same. They're very careful. These letters, this letter, hey, always looks the same all across. And you look back and forth, you can do it. Don't look at my handwriting. You're not going to be able to make out what's going on there. So these guys were good with that. We'll look at comments here in a minute to go through and make sure we catch what you guys are saying. Quality control. Supervisors or experienced scribes would oversee. And this is one of the comments here that you guys made that was right on. They oversee to ensure accuracy. They would inspect the finished copies and compare them to the originals to verify their correctness. Marginal notes and annotations. Now, sometimes they added these notes in the margin or make these little notes on the side to manuscripts, providing explanations, corrections, alternative readings. These annotations served as aids to future copyists and help them prevent errors from being perpetuated. And then, like we had talked about earlier, the Masoretes added these accents and vowel points. They developed this system to put this in, and again, not making actual vowels to push over. Now you can see why you wouldn't put a vowel in there, because if you're doing a letter count, you would mess up what the original was. So they would be put on the bottom. And then you had acoustics and patterns. Now, they would even use this before in oral tradition. You would use acrostics. Now, acrostics, if you're not familiar with that, is it's a poetic device. You use the first letter for the first line, the second letter of the alphabet to start the first word of the second line, and so forth. So you would have like the first line would start with letter A, second line would start with letter B, and so forth, or Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, and go down the list like that. So you'd hit it all. And Psalm, I believe the longest Psalm, is it 91 or 191? Now I'm drawing a blank on that. The longest Psalm in the Bible is an acrostic Psalm. There's a lot that you have in Proverbs where it talks about that, where you do have acrostics that are used there as well. And patterns. In Hebrew, you have one of the main things one of the main mechanisms in Hebrew poetry is parallelism. Wise man does such and such, but a fool does this. That's antithetic parallelism. It's this, but that. And that kind of pattern you would see a lot, and it makes it easier to memorize. It also makes it easier to write down because you've got this pattern going. So
real quick answer to the one about Psalms.
Oh, okay.
Had
I was just going to check
119.
119. Thank you. Yes, I'm going to make sure we have this exactly. Shiloh, next one here. I've even been at a fresh spring on Mount Carmel. I had a shiver go down my spine thinking that Elijah might have drunk from it. Wow.
That is cool history.
Yeah, I'd love to go see them at the land of Israel sometime. That would be really, really cool. And here in Scotland, you almost trip over Celtic and Roman relics. I mean,
see,
dude, you're making me jealous.
That would be cool.
Yeah,
we don't have that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I tripped over a rock once. I thought it was an Indian. You can find Indian arrowheads here.
Yes, sometimes.
You can. When my wife was a kid and she grew up on a farm, when her dad went out and plowed, they would walk through the field, and every once in a while they would find, not so much anymore because that part, the first layer has been plowed up enough, you don't see it, but you can find Indian arrowheads there. And some of the roads that we have here today were paths from Indians walking through their paths, and they followed animal paths, animal tracks. So some of the roads we have are just old.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, but it follows the natural terrain, so it works well with that. And prehistoric arrowheads everywhere here. Sorry. I thought I got you on that one, man. All right, well, I'll find something. We'll have something here. Something will come up. So there are a lot of. Okay. All right. I gotta pop this up. See what he says here. Dig up Jerusalem. Dig up Jerusalem finds archaeological evidence that proves the Holy Bible to be true. Dig up Mecca.
Camel bones.
Camel bones.
Yep.
Well, there were camels in the Quran. See, it's a miracle.
Yeah, that would be about the level of logic there.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We just proved the Quran, so now we can all go home. Yes, got it. Okay, so this is how scribes ensured accuracy throughout the ages. So all through, I would say last 2,000 years, up until where the printing press was, and then you could relax some of the restrictions. I'm not even sure if there still is a tradition among Jewish scribes. I wouldn't doubt it. I did not look into that to see if that was the case. That would be something that'd be interesting to look into. And then finally, you have the community oversight. Not only do you have the quality control within the scriptorium, but you also have the community itself. You didn't have to worry about junk mail in the Middle Ages. Writing was rare. It was hard to come by. And this, as you can imagine, if you have somebody meticulously writing down almost an art form, going through each one of these to create a scroll, this is not something you're just going to toss in the trash. This is something you would treasure as a family. It would cost a lot to be able to get one of these. It wouldn't be kept in the home anyway. This would be something that would be kept in a synagogue. So top 7 reasons why we can trust the Old Testament text. Now that we're going over all this background, we have a little bit more appreciation for it coming by. These are the top 7 reasons why we can trust the text. Now, again, we're not looking at historical accuracy. We're not looking at whether it was inspired or not. Those things can be established later, just looking at the text by itself. The first would be manuscript evidence. The Old Testament was supported by over 10,000 ancient manuscripts and fragments. Now, remember, we're talking about the Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey. There's maybe a half a dozen or so. Here we have over 10,000 manuscripts and fragments. And fragments would be partials from various periods throughout history. While no original manuscript, which would technically be called an autograph, while those do not exist, the abundance of copies allows scholars to compare and cross-reference different textual traditions, adding to the reconstruction of the original text. Then you have early manuscripts. Some manuscripts of the Old Testament, such as portions of the Dead Sea Scrolls, date back to the 3rd century BC. We really need to do one on the Dead Sea. I'm looking for, I've got to do a live stream on the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, yeah.
That was such a great find, a treasure trove. And these manuscripts predate the earliest complete copies of other ancient texts by centuries, demonstrating the antiquity of the Old Testament text and reducing the likelihood of significant corruption over time. So you got all this just background, just raw evidence. Then we have the Masoretic tradition that we just talked about, going through how carefully they preserved it. Continuity of transmission. Now, I think you hear about this order of transmission sometimes with Quranic scholars, right? So talking
Yes.
about
The oral
tradition.
Tradition, the chain of narration.
Chain of narration, right. So for the continuity of transmission for the Old Testament, the text, it occurred within a religious and cultural context where reverence in the scriptures was paramount, and religious communities, including Jewish and later Christian scribes, were dedicated to preserving the text faithfully. Manuscript agreement. Comparative study, word for word, reveals the high level of precision between the texts. Minor variants consist only by slips of the pen or spelling. Only 13 small changes were discovered in the entire Dead Sea Scrolls copy of Isaiah, 8 of which were known from other sources previously. So it's like, if anything would disprove the Old Testament textual reliability, it would have been probably Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, yeah. That would have been
you would have heard about this great cover-up. It's like, oh, shh, can't let that one out. But then when we just open ourselves up and say, okay, well, let's take a look at this. Let's look at, we have faith in believing that God is, preserved his text. Let's take a look and see, how does this compare to what we have? Oh, wow, that's like spot on. Couldn't have planned that myself.
I think that's kind of the point.
Well, that's why I'm not in charge, right? And then you have textual criticism. We talked about that. And also for the New Testament, looking at each one, and comparative studies. Scholars use comparative studies with other ancient Near East texts, such as inscriptions and literature, to collaborate historical events, customs, and cultural practices in the Old Testament. And so now you can compare it to all and say, this really does line up. You're not taking some text, perhaps like, oh, I'm not going to be talking about anything specific, but let's say that you have this text here that says it was written at a certain time. Let's just make something up, maybe the 7th century or something, that was written, and you start to compare it to historical documents in the area, especially if that particular text says, hey, people here believe such and such. I can't imagine. Can you think of any examples?
I
like
can't
this?
off the top of my head at all.
Well, like, let's say the 7th century text said these other people believed in this thing called the Trinity, this Father, Son, and Mother.
Yeah, something like that, hypothetically speaking. That would be, and then we look at all the evidence of this people group that has existed long before this claim was made. And not a single one of them, including all the heresies that we see, follow that concept.
Well,
that sort of Trinity
in
model.
that case, number 7 on why we can trust the Old Testament. The Old Testament hasn't come across this, but maybe this other supposed hypothetical document would have come across this, and this would have said something incorrect about, comparing it to other documents. Like, hey, this historically, this didn't happen, guys. Come on. So where are you pulling this up from?
Well, also, that other historical document also might hypothetically make a very similar claim about another group. Again, that didn't happen in the same section.
What would that be?
Well, not the same exact section. It was an earlier statement about the Jews.
Oh, okay.
saying that who is it? Ezra is the son of Allah, and it's like, no, Jews don't make
Yeah,
that
but
claim.
that document was historically accurate for other things like Alexander. Wasn't Alexander the Great in there? And he was very
But counts on
historically.
if you ask the Muslims now, they got ashamed of that pretty quick. Holy cow!
Okay,
My
but
video on that guy.
all right, but at least it
embarrassed the
is
Muslims so bad.
it is scientifically reliable. We can tell.
Nope.
Talking about astronomy, they listen. They were well known for their astronomy transmission. This other group that you're talking about, transmission of mathematics and astronomy and science in general. So we can say that it is accurate. I don't care what you say.
They still claim the moon split in the 6th
It
century.
did.
There's no.
And the sun. There is a muddy pool of water around here somewhere where that sun sets. All right.
Found by Dul Karnain. Yep.
Dul Karnain.
Dul Karnain, which now they want to change who that historically was, because they.
All right, I've got to.
I
got to check the live chat here. Imagine they were able to excavate the Temple Mount. The Muslim dig up bits of it and dispose of everything.
Yeah.
That
would be a treasure trove right there.
It would be,
of all the temples and all that history.
That would be good. Achi pitch in, pinch Allah. If only they knew disposing.
I think he's referring to the comment about them disposing it.
Oh, okay. And Dead Sea Scrolls prove perfect preservation. Yeah, so
not perfect preservation, but again, does that perfect preservation being, because you did say it was like 95% accuracy. There were small variants.
I think it's actually I think it's actually higher than that, but yes.
Do those variants even matter?
Well, that's the
long term.
Okay, so that's the question. We looked hard at the New Testament to say, were there, and we can even take a live stream and look at the top, and I have this set up that we could do this, the top 5 Old Testament variants that have been found, and say, let's look at them. What are these variants? What does it really say? Does it make a difference?
Does it change the message of either the Old Testament or the New Testament?
Right.
Does it change any of the core tenets of Christianity? If the answer is no,
then it's meaningless. Right. And please let me know in the live chat or not if you guys would like to do that. If you guys would like to go over those textual variants, if that's something that's of interest of you. If we're digging too deep and we're getting too much in the weeds here, we'll pass over this. Won't even work on it. But we're looking at finding ways that we can give a response to critics to say, oh, it was just made up and things like this. You look at this, the amount of work that Jewish scholars put into the transmission of their text. These guys were not messing around. They were very careful with this. We do have over 10,000 manuscripts. This is reliable. This is more reliable than the manual you have, the technical manual you have for your car. I would literally have staked my life on this. So,
well, you'd literally stake your soul on this.
My eternal life, yes.
That's for certain.
So, I have an example, and we want to go over this. And I mentioned this earlier, and this is the Hittites. We have, do you guys know who the Hittites are? This is a group that was within, it's mentioned in the Bible. And it's also, they're a fairly large group in the Bronze Age. They were a superpower in the Bronze Age. In the 19th century, biblical scholars and historians primarily relied on the Bible and classical texts for information about ancient civilizations. The Hittites are mentioned numerous times in the Old Testament, particularly in relation to interactions with ancient Israel and other neighboring people. However, outside of biblical references, there was little collaboration and evidence for the existence of the Hittites. So scholars would roll their eyes and at the mention of the Hittites. Oh, obviously they were mythological people, or at best allegories made up by primitive Bronze Age civilizations. You know, one cannot truly trust in the Bible or the Old Testament. A bunch of primitives. But then in 1906, the German archaeologist Hugo Winkler and his team began excavations in modern-day Turkey. These excavations revealed extensive evidence for a powerful ancient civilization that flourished in Anatolia, that's modern-day Turkey, during the late Bronze Age, around 1600 to 1200 BC. Discoveries included monumental architecture, palaces, temples, inscriptions written in cuneiform script, royal archives, and artifacts depicting Hittite art and culture. Lo and behold, the Hittites did exist. Do I hear a big whoopsie from the skeptics of the 19th century? Well, that don't beat all, Buford. They got it right. Not only that, but the scholars today now recognize the Hittites as one of the major civilizations of ancient Near East, alongside well-known other empires such as Egypt, Assyria, and Babylonia. And in fact, there's this you can see this map on the right here. There's this triad of empires that held things together during the Bronze Age, because one empire had tin, another one had copper, and they put it together, and it was like the oil of their era.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was a big collapse in 1177, which was the Bronze Age collapse, and threw them into Dark Ages. It was, we ought to go over that. It's really cool area.
Very interesting. Definitely with the history of when the Israelites came in during that time period.
Oh, yes. And does that have anything to do with the Exodus? Very good questions. So, but today you can learn the Hittite language at University of Chicago, University of California, Berkeley, University of Pennsylvania, the University of Cambridge, and Harvard University. In fact, this is off their website. I checked this out last night. Yes, you can learn the Hittite language. Previously said that it did not exist because it was just made up in the Bible. Those 19th century skeptics weren't just wrong to doubt the narrative of the Old Testament. They were way wrong. Way wrong. Dun, dun, dun. So I'm going to take a look at any of the comments here. We got Francis said, whoopsie. Whoopsie doodle doo. I have made a big boo-boo. Yes, this was correct. Yeah. And it's, you know what? It's okay to say and make mistakes like this and go, but man, you got to really just put a little bit of humility in this when you're reading this, and not stand so tightly on this. There was a real strong idea that the Old Testament was just a made-up literature. And not as in the 19th century, especially late 19th century, and this is pervasive thought even today, that now they just made up by some guys there. But when you look at it, no, these are reliable enough that you can use these as historical documents. So again, we're going to put up the chat there for you guys to jump on if you want to. This is the last call because we're wrapping this up, and do really want to be able to hear what you have to say on this. And so last week, if you get a chance to see it, this is where we had the play that we went through, and we talked about, was the Bible censored? We went over the Council of Nicaea. This is a whipping post to say that people would sometimes use about the Bible. Say it was just put, the New Testament was just put slammed.
Invented in the Council of Nicaea.
That's right. And then we had last Tuesday, Dune, Lord of the Rings versus Dune. And compare the two. You have one dark side with Dune and one lighter side with Hope from a Christian author who wrote Lord of the Rings, those two. And we're looking forward to coming up, the release of the next Dune, part 2, early next month. We're ramping up for that. And part of the question is, next Tuesday, where is God in Dune? Where is God? Where are all the Christians at? Where is this? We have, not just in Dune, but in science fiction in general, pictures of the future. Where are Christians in the future for sci-fi? And then we have Brother Francis joining us.
Hello, brothers. How are you?
Very good. How are you doing?
I'm very well. I just had my cup of tea. I feel very British right now, but
Hey, how is the land where you can't dig in the backyard before finding some king's, I don't know, rings or skull or something back there? How is it out there in that land?
it's all right. I actually tried digging at the backyard of mine. The police came and they told me not to do that because you never know. I might, especially sell it to Saudi Arabia. Maybe the brown man has an issue. Oh, I'm teasing. Anyways, I'm going out of tangent. Brother, I do have questions.
Okay.
Go.
So some people actually say the reliability. A lot of people talk to me about the reliability of the Bible, basically. I understand that we can't have like the full. We don't never claim to have that perfect preservation, like like Muslim perfect preservation, brother. But we don't have that, do we? So when we say to people, some people say, do you really trust in your core that every single date that throughout the whole entire Bible is accurate? I personally say, I don't think that everything can be perfectly accurate when it comes to dates or everything, because a lot of people have that issue when it comes to the book of Daniel, especially. They say whether it was 400 BC, 600 BC, 200 BC. So a lot of people have that issue, but I don't see that as an issue. Basically, I see that okay, there must be differences, but that doesn't create any difference for me. What would you say on that? We're very legalistic in their perspective that every date is so perfectly accurate. What would you say to that, brother?
Well, okay, so so much about I guess I'd have to look at case by case.
Yeah.
The question of Daniel, I'd have to see what the accusation is with that.
Okay.
And we're I believe in the inerrancy of Scripture.
Okay.
We're talking. So you're talking about like the historical accuracy or maybe authorship or other things like that.
Yes.
And today we'd be talking and I'm not trying to restrict the question at all, but we would be talking about the textual reliability. Is what we have today, how confident can we say that it matches the autographs? And I would say pretty darn accurate. And textual criticism gives us the opportunity to look at that unbiasedly and say, okay, now we have these differences in these texts. What can we say about them? Was there a transcription error? Or is there something else going on? Sometimes, like in the New Testament, you have an annotation on the side that would be brought into the text. It appears that that's what has happened, that we don't know for sure. So you would say that generally speaking, the older manuscripts were probably more reliable and so forth. So that ability gets. So concerning dates and times, that might be a good one to look into. And if you
now, obviously they weren't using BC time frame, so you do have the later on people had to make the translation between what they believe they were using as their basis for their time measurement into what we're currently using here. And of course we've changed that as well with the Julian calendar and so forth. Gregorian to Julian, or vice
Julian
versa.
to Gregorian.
I was going for translation, but
gotcha.
Yes. So we've had those changes. So the question is, in that case, did we translate it right?
Yes.
Because that would be up to human error on that, because it might have been recorded correctly according to the measuring blocks that they currently had at the time. We just might not necessarily perfectly understand what those were.
Yeah. Do you understand where
Yes.
he's coming from with that?
Absolutely, yes. Because we at the end of the day, it's like a novelist. A novelist can write his sort of idea and everything so perfectly clear. He's trying to portray the image like which is in his mind, but some people can perceive it so differently and take it out of the context too. But I know when it comes to the biblical accuracy, there were actual people surrounding that artist himself, and they were like, "Yeah, this is how it is, and this is the unification of the writings that we are going to have." So yeah, you did claim that very clear to me. Thank you so much
Now,
again.
if memory serves, they were using lunar calendar at the time, right? Daniel, I don't remember if that was what
I
they
don't
were.
know with Daniel if it was lunar calendar or not.
Well, because that would be another shift that makes it kind of hard. I know definitely within Islam they're using lunar calendar for
Right.
a lot
Yes.
of things,
Right.
and that's why one of the reasons why Ramadan just shifts all around all
Right.
the time.
Yeah.
So, and that would again make it hard to translate into the more standard solar calendar from the lunar. Again, it doesn't mean that's inaccurate. It would be accurate for what they had at the time.
Yeah.
But
And I think the other question too is like, okay, at what point does it really matter? I work a lot with data that we're sampling data from real world environments, maybe temperature, maybe pressure, or something like that. And there's a question about precision and accuracy. Precision is I have a very precise sensor, and it will give me plus or minus 1/100th of a degree.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. It's but if it's out of calibration, that level of precision is off. So that's the accuracy part. I'm not accurate, and then I'm not precise. So those are two things you need to look at with this. So if you're looking at like a date in the Old Testament, how much does it really matter overall? I think sometimes we can get a little bit too fine-tooth comb on looking at this.
Yes.
Now, it would make a difference with Daniel if Daniel says that he is under the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar or under a Persian king. And then we have his writings. It looks like it was done hundreds of years after he was supposedly do it. Well, then there could be a problem there because it looks like it's not the actual authorship. But if it's during Nebuchadnezzar's rule and we're off by 5 years, who cares? I don't think
that's
that makes
the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, that would be.
Yeah, you were saying, sorry?
No, that would, if it's like plus or minus 5 years, that could easily be lost in translating between years, different ways of measuring years and months.
Yeah.
Later on, a human error.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Again, it doesn't change the main messages that were given in that or the main message of the Bible.
Right.
No.
Right. Okay. All right. Did you have another point that you want to bring up?
No, that's it. Thank you so much. I just wanted to.
Okay.
I just wanted to speak about this one topic, but yeah, definitely going more and more into conversing with you guys in this.
Okay.
Because I'm reading more into this too, so this is quite a fun topic to discuss. Basically, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for jumping on.
No problem.
Yeah, and if you guys have ideas for future episodes too, please add them in because we could dig deeper into this topic, especially if there are questions about apologetics. People are throwing something at you. I didn't. If the timing of Daniel is an issue, people say, "Oh, well, we know that's not true." Then we can dig into that a little bit further and see if there's a good response for it. So we have some other comments here in the chat I want to bring up. He said Daniel's debate usually resolves around if you believe the miraculous or not. Early dating, if you think Daniel was a prophet. Later dating, if prophecy is not. Okay, that would make sense because he said some specific things. I think one of the coolest prophecies he had was about the coming empires.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
The Persian Empire, then Alexander the Great, then you get the Roman Empire. He has this picture of the statue, right? And this Roman Empire split, and it's iron, and they're known, the Iron Age, and they've got clay mixed in, and the split of the empire, east and west. It's like, what?
And that would have happened way after the writing of, even if you gave it a later date of Daniel.
Yeah.
That would have had to have happened way after, because we're talking way after Jesus' death and resurrection.
Yeah. And
even for the splitting of Rome.
And those would have been, as far as I know, Daniel would have been in the scrolls of Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah.
So we got that pegged down, and here he is hitting that on the nose. So yeah, that was awesome. That was a good one. And then Damian says 3 ideologies: communism, Islam, and Nazism, revising and rewriting history and archaeology.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty.
I think even if you go back to the comment earlier about the about Mecca and the whole thing there, dig in Mecca and you get bones. Yeah, well, you look at the Kaaba and it's supposed to have been built by Abraham and Ishmael. No, there's no historical evidence of that at all.
No,
that's so badly done. That's such a bad claim, historically speaking. That's just laughable.
And then we have Hutchie. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing your name right. Hutchie said maybe they should have used BM before Messiah. Boy, that would have been nice. Use our day. What's wrong with these ancient people? Why don't they use our calendar?
Countdown. They know exactly.
It would make it
coming.
so much easier. And so yes, these are all good points. So pretty much wrapping it up now. Looking forward to next week when we have looking at Dune and where is God, and then following that next Thursday, we're going to dig deeper into the reliability of the Old Testament, looking at it from a different angle. Today we looked at textual criticism. Next week we're going to take a look at it from a different angle. And please let us know, especially if you join our Patreon, you get a chance to help steer this channel in whatever, well, I would say whatever direction you like, but you can put your 2 cents in to help us guide what are going to be upcoming episodes, what are going to be the themes that we're going to be talking about. So until then, I want to thank everybody for their participation. It's been a great discussion, and I really look forward to these and looking forward to the next one as well.